All right, and what is up, guys? Welcome to another edition of the Fight Forecast. I am Ryan, the owner and creator of DualCoastSports.com. I'm going to be doing this weekly, just breaking down the fights, getting a little more in depth than what we do in our write up, where we give you an idea of what kind of slate we think that you should be playing these fighters on. So we're going to go a little bit more in depth in this podcast with that, give you some details and stuff like that about why we think what we think. And hopefully this is another avenue that you guys can use as subscribers to be able to uh, see yourself at the top of the leaderboards at the end of the day. So the first fight we got here, we got Gavin Tucker versus Billy Quarantillo. Um, Personally, I think that this could be a very sneaky fight of the night. Um, I think that both fighters are pretty even when it comes to the type of fighters that they are. Uh, I do lean Cornelio a little bit more. I think that he's just been doing this a little bit longer. And when it comes to striking ability, I think that his strikes are a little bit better. He lands 7.51 strikes per minute compared to Tucker only landing Tucker only landing 3.67. So I think when it comes down to it, Billy is just going to have more strikes, which is going to lead him to be able to get a decision victory. Um, Another thing, even though Tucker has been working on it a little bit, Tucker only does have a 40% takedown defense, and Quarantillo does land 1.71 takedowns per fight. So I think that could lead to potentially helping him as well, getting the decision victory. I think for DraftKings perspective, you can play either or. Quarantilio, I think, is a better play all around, either in GPP or cash. You can play him. Where Tucker, I think I would stick to a multi-entry GPP with him. If he does win, he's probably going to score pretty good, but he's a little bit more risky of a play than Quarantilio at only 8,500. So the next fight we got here, we have Chase Hooper versus Peter Barrett. We last saw Chase Hooper not look very good at all, honestly. Um, just his striking game was not there in his last fight. There was some that I was a little bit worried about initially when I looked into this fight, but the more that I looked into it, I just realized that Peter Barrett is really just kind of a layup opponent. UFC is giving Hooper a pretty easy opponent here to get him uh, back on, the grind basically, and back to where he needs to be in order to become a mainstay in the UFC, in my opinion. Um, Hooper lands 4.46 strikes per minute. He does absorb 4.5 strikes per minute. Um, if we're talking multi entry, I don't hate Barrett because he does have average power from the videos that I've seen in the fights that I've seen of his. But I just think at the end of the day, I probably wouldn't touch him, honestly. At 6,900, he's just not worth it. Um, he puts himself in some bad situations often in fights. And I just think that eventually he will put himself in a situation where Hooper will be able to capitalize and get the finish either via submission or ground and pound. For Hooper, I like him more so for GPP. I think his price at 9,300, it's just a little too much to put in the cash lineup. Um, just in case he does pull another, fight like he did last time and just not look good at all. I personally I don't see that happening, but even at 9,300, his price point's pretty high to get in the cash lineup. So I think he's more so a GPP play this slate. The next fight we got here, we got Tisha Torres versus Sam Hughes. This is probably my biggest stance of this slate. I am completely fading Tisha Torres. At 8,900, I just think that her price point is too high. In her last couple victories that she's gotten, which have always been decision victories, she's one of the queens of going to the decision. She's averaged maybe around 80 points. And don't get me wrong, that's not bad. It's just when it comes to value, you're not really even hitting 10x there. You need to get to about 90 points to get that 10x. And in GPP, you more so look for 11 or 12x. So I personally, I just don't see the value in Tisha Torres. I think she'll win the fight. She's definitely a lot better fighter than Sam Hughes. I think Sam Hughes is still a little bit too green, honestly. She just didn't really show me much in the videos that I watched of her. Um, Tisha Torres has fought some of the best in the UFC, which is why her win loss record is not that great, honestly. But I don't see the path to her making value. So for GPP, I definitely do not like her. Cash, if you want to play her, I guess she's not a horrible cash play. But I just think for the 8,900 price value that there are other fighters around her price point that probably will get you more points or get you a better chance at more points. Um, so yeah, this fight I'm honestly pretty much fading for the most part completely. If you want to put Hughes in a multi lineup, just due to the simple fact that you know Torres has not looked great in some fights, and Hughes, from what I saw, does have some pretty good power. I'm not completely against it, but at the end of the day, like I said, Torres, almost all of her fights go to the decision. So I probably honestly would completely fade this fight, unless you're highly multi-entering GPP. The next fight we got here, we got Cub Swanson versus Daniel Pineda. Um, I think Cub is kind of on his way out, honestly. You know, yeah, he's been fighting some pretty well-known fighters, but just he hasn't looked like the same Cub that he used to. I think that Pineda has a very good chance to get the submission victory here. Cub has 7 losses via submission. Pineda has 18 wins via submission. Pineda is just an absolute finisher. All 27 of his wins have came via finish, whether it be submission or knockout. He's definitely a guy that you want in your lineups. I think that there's a very high likelihood that he gets the finish in this fight. I just don't think Cub is the same fighter that he used to be. Um, and I think that is going to be the downside for him. Pineda does average 1.47 takedowns per fight. Cub only has a 60% takedown defense. Um, and yeah, Swanson, yeah, he throws a little bit more, but he also eats a little bit more. So I don't see this fight going good for him, honestly. I think that this is probably pretty close to his swan song. I know UFC's been cutting some fighters recently. I would not at all be shocked if his name is on the list pretty soon. Um, so yeah, I think that this is a fight that I like Daniel Pineda a lot in GPP. Um, Swanson, if you want a multi-enter, I guess maybe you can sprinkle him in a couple. Just because he has shown that finishing ability in the past, but personally, I don't think that happens here. I think that he more than likely gets finished. Next fight, we got Junior Dos Santos versus Cyril Gain. Now, I'm in the minority on this fight. I think that the lines are a little bit too far apart, honestly. Uh, Gain is at 9,200 price point, while Junior Dos Santos is at 7,000. And yeah, don't get me wrong, Junior Dos Santos has looked horrible his last couple fights. But if you look at the fighters that he's fighting, I mean, he's fighting top notch fighters in the UFC. Those are the guys that are finishing him. We're talking Nagano, we're talking, um, top notch fighters. Now I know UFC wants Game to be that, and they're building him up to be one of the next top fighters. I just think that this could be a little bit too soon, a little bit too much too soon for Game. I mean, Dos Santos is a former UFC heavyweight champion. We're not talking about some scrub here. Uh, I think that Dos Santos is not getting enough respect in this fight, and I would not at all be shocked if Dos Santos gets the victory here. For 7,000, he honestly is one of my favorite value plays of this slate, maybe my favorite value of this slate, um, because all he has to do is get 70 points to hit 10x. Even if the fight goes to decision, he should probably get 70 points if he wins via decision. So I like him a lot in this fight. I think that he is very good value. I would not at all be shocked if he honestly finishes Game, to be completely honest. Um, if you're multi-entering, like I've said before, I would probably throw Gain in a couple just because, he does have that ability to get the finish. And like I said, Junior Dos Santos has not looked very good his last couple fights. So I definitely think that this is a fight that you want in your lineup one way or the other. But I think you'd be a little bit crazy not to have some junior on your team, so honestly. So the next fight we got here, we got Kevin Holland versus Ronaldo Souza. I swear every single time that I look at a UFC card to start studying it, Holland is fighting someone new. It's crazy how often you see his name lately on a UFC card. Um, Souza is another one of those fighters that I think he's on his way out, honestly. And just like uh, Dos Santos, all of his wins have been um, against pretty well known fighters. He's not losing against scrubs. I personally think that Kevin Holland is becoming one of those top notch fighters. I think that he is showing an ability that he hasn't shown previously in his fights, where he's trying to be a little more patient, picking his spots a little bit more, and that's allowing him to become a much better fighter. Uh, I think that he's just going to be a lot faster than Susan in this fight. I think that he's going to be able to pick him apart at will, honestly. Um, I think that the line for this fight right now, you can get Holland at about negative 110. I think that's great value, honestly. I think that this is going to be a pretty easy fight for Holland, if I'm being completely honest. I, I think that he'll more than likely finish him. I just think that Holland is becoming one of the top notch fighters, and Suits is on his way out, and that this is not going to be a good fight for him personally. When it comes to DraftKings, Holland, I think at 8,200, you can play either cash or GPP. He's going to score well enough to give you value in either of those. I love him in cash, love him in GPP. Souza, I would stick strictly to GPP. If he does win, he probably will get the finish, and will be a good amount of points. But I personally don't really see it, so I wouldn't play him much. But in GPP, I definitely would sprinkle him in a little bit. Next, we got Mackenzie Dern versus Verna Jindarova. Um, I hear a lot of talk and I see a lot of talk on Twitter about Verna getting the upset in this fight. I just don't see it. Um, this fight more than likely will get to the ground. Dern is just a lot better on the ground. She's one of the best BJJ fighters, around, honestly. Maybe one of the best ever. When it comes to being on the feet, I think she's better on the feet as well, honestly, if this fight does somehow stay on the feet. Dern lands 3.07 strikes per minute. Genderovia only lands 1.22 strikes per minute. So, on the feet, I just think that Dern is better. I think Dern is a lot stronger than her. So if the fight does get to the ground or gets against the cage, I think that she's going to be able to control her. I personally don't really see the talk of Verna winning this fight. Um, I like Dern a lot. I have a bet on her as well. I think that she definitely is a good play. Um, when it comes to DraftKings, I'd probably stick to her in GPP, just because if she does not get the finish, uh, she may not score the greatest, honestly. At 8,700, you, you need her to get about 90 points to hit value. I don't know if she hits that if she doesn't get the finish. So I would probably stick to her in GPP, not cash games. And then Verna, if you're multi-entering, maybe sprinkle her in a couple just because she is a great submission artist. This fight more than likely will end up on the ground. Um, and once you get to the ground, who knows what's going to happen. I personally think that Dern is the better fighter on the ground and would be able to control the fight and not get submitted. But you never know what's going to happen. So, I'd probably sprinkle a little Werner in there at 7,500, but I wouldn't go too crazy on her at all. So next we got the co-main event. We got Tony Ferguson versus Charles Oliveira. Um, the big question in this fight is going to be, can Tony Ferguson come back and be the fighter that he used to be? How is Tony Ferguson going to look after losing his first fight in forever and frankly getting dismantled in that fight? He just got completely manhandled. It wasn't even close. How's he going to come back? Personally, I think that he'll come back just fine. I think that he is a good enough fighter that he'll be able to handle the loss and come back just fine, be the same Tony Ferguson we used to know and love. And I think that this is a very good matchup for him as well. Oliveira, you know, yeah, he's on a nice little run lately, but at the end of the day, he hasn't really been fighting very good opponents. The opponents that he's been fighting are nowhere on the level of Tony Ferguson. So I think that this just may be a little too much for him, honestly. I think Ferguson is going to be able to handle him on the feet, pick him apart, maybe even get a late finish. Charles's main weapon is his submission game, and Ferguson has only ever been submitted once, and that was like 10 years ago. So I personally, I just think that this is a very good matchup for Ferguson. I like him betting wise. I like him DraftKings wise. Um, I like him in both cash and GPP um, for DraftKings. I think at 8,500, he's a great value either way. So I like him a lot on DraftKings. Charles, multi-entry GPP, just simply due to the submission aspect. Like I said, it's been a while since Ferguson has been submitted, but when you have a fighter of Charles's level who is that good at one thing, you do have to put him in a couple lineups just in case, because he has shown many times in the past that he does have that finishing ability. Um, Now we got the co-main event. The main event of the evening. We got Devison Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno. Both of these fighters fought just a couple weeks ago. Um, Moreno looked, in my opinion, a lot better than Figueiredo did. Figueiredo, was not looking very great. Alex Perez just kind of rushed in and got caught. The main question in my mind is, can Figueiredo go deep into fights? We haven't seen that before. Only 3 of his fights have ever gone to decision, and that was 3 rounds. He's never gone past 3 rounds. Can he do that? Can, if he's pushed, can he last that long? I question if he can, honestly. The type of fighter that he is, he's a very uh, he puts everything behind everything, honestly. So I don't know if he can go 5 rounds, honestly. Luckily, I don't necessarily think that he's going to have to in this fight. I think Moreno, I don't think that he's ready for this fight. He has been fighting very good recently, but the level of competition that he's been fighting just has not been that great, in my opinion. Uh, I don't think that he's ready for this fight at all, honestly. Um, I think that he more than likely does get finished, which is something that has never happened in his career. He never has been finished, but I think more than likely that will happen in this fight. Um, I just think that Moreno is not ready for this fight. I think that Figueiredo's power is just too good. So I like Figueiredo more so GPP. I mean, you want him in your cash lineup as well, probably, just simply due to the fact that he's going to be so high owned in cash games that you kind of need him in there. But I like him a little more in GPP, honestly. Moreno, I'd multi enter GPP, put him in some lineups. If you want to put him in your cash lineup as well at 7,200, not horrible. But, if the fight goes how I think it's going to go, I probably would only just put him in multi-entry GPPs because I wouldn't at all be shocked if he only scores 30 or 40 points personally. Um, so yeah, that's the UFC 256 card. It's a very good, fun, entertaining card. A lot of good fights on it. Um, I hope you guys liked what you heard and saw in this podcast. Right now, we are running a great promotion on dualcoastsports.com. $20.20 for 1 month subscription. That'll get you all of the DFS content, all of the bets. What we normally put out: NFL, UFC, some college football, sometimes some college basketball. So you get good value for your money there. And, finally, you can get some good out of 2020. So, yeah, definitely hit me up on Twitter at RSCMMA89 or on the business page at Dual Coast Sports if you have any questions or anything like that. But, yeah, let's get that money, guys.